Hi, my name is Mindy Esposito, and this is my choice project for ED338 Inclusive Education. This is going to be a collection of tips, strategies, and resources that I can implement in my future classroom that are focused around behavior management. When Professor Harmon first gave us an option for a choice project, I knew exactly what I wanted to focus on. One of the big parts of early education is teaching the students how to manage their emotions and their behaviors in the classroom. Implementing strategies and practices when the students are young should help to limit the amount of behavioral issues as they grow up. This is something I'm passionate about for a few reasons. First, as a future early educator, I think it is important to learn because it is so important when the students are young. Second, my cousin has a lot of behavioral management issues in school, and he has since he was young. He is now in 4th grade, and the teachers do not know how to handle him, and the teachers have missed an opportunity to teach him how to assess and manage his own behaviors. I would like to educate myself to help prevent these types of outbreaks of behavior to the best of my ability. My goal of this choice project is to use my prior knowledge, my knowledge learned from class, and my research to create a set of tips that I can remember while teaching and to create some strategies that I can implement into my classroom. To do my research, I first started at the LaSalle databases. I looked for anything I could find to help kick off my project. I found a study called Efficiency of Coaching Preschool Teachers to Manage Challenging Behavior by Matthew E. Brock and Lauren E. Beeman DeGila. I was a little skeptical because this was a study analyzing the effectiveness of the teachers after they were properly coached, but I read it anyway, and I ended up finding some pretty interesting points. Some of the strategies that were implemented after the teachers were coached were referencing visual supports, contingent positive reinforcement of the student's behavior, and prompting self-management. They defined referencing visual supports as referring to visual representations of what the expectations of the students were, such as for nap time. Contingent reinforcement was defined as giving the student positive reinforcement when he did well with the expectations, because that was something that had worked for this student before the study. Prompting self-management was defined as teaching the student how to identify when his behaviors did not meet the expectations, recording whether they did or not, and directing him to fix those behaviors that did not meet the expectations. The authors discussed how the self-management enforces the student responsibility piece of behavior management and empowers the student to change their behavior to follow the expectations. Although this study was to analyze teachers, it also showed the students' behavior improving when these strategies were put into place. This study also shows that teachers getting properly trained in behavior management can have an important effect on the classroom. I also used some of the resources from our class theme, Inclusive and Safe Learning Environments. We have been given a lot of great resources, and I think it is important to use those to make my collection of tips and strategies. One of the resources that I like a lot is Paula Kluth's article, Hanging in There, on her blog, because it emphasizes behaviors that are usually seen as unexpected or not allowed in the classroom. During this theme, we each also analyzed an IRIS module, and I did the early education one, knowing I was doing this for my choice project. I will take some of those tips from the module and I will add them to my collection. Another resource from this theme that I think is important to use is the chapter 3 about the physical classroom. It is important to think about how the setup of your classroom can affect someone's behavior. I will use this for one of my strategies. My other tips and strategies have come from things I already knew from my previous classes and experiences, or things that I came up with based on what I've learned and experienced. One of the first things to do when you get a new classroom of students is set your expectations from the beginning. On the first day, the students should know what the expectations are. That way they know what to follow. For example, if the students are expected to raise their hand when they ask a question on the rug, they should be explained this and be shown how to do this on day 1. The students always need to have some sort of model so they know what to do when they're asked of these expectations. As different expectations come up, the students should be shown another model of what to do. Another thing that the students need at the beginning of the year is understanding the difference between expectations and rules. Expectations are more broad, and those are usually school-wide based. Rules are more specific and can be created together in the classroom with the students to give them that sense of empowerment and ownership. Rules can also be specific to the setting. Different rules for the classroom than for the playground, but they're all based around the same school expectations. For example, being safe can be a school expectation, but being safe in the classroom could look different than the playground. And another thing about the rules is to state them positively. Rather than saying don't run, we should say use walking feet. Another thing to do at the beginning of the year is use visuals when showing expectations or the visual supports. Have pictures of what the expectations are to point to when giving directions. So, for example, if one of the directions is nap time, then a student should have a picture to refer back to that's them sleeping quietly on their mat or rug or whatever it is for your classroom. And then one more thing that should be done at the beginning of the year is the communication with the families. Letting them know what our expectations are in the classroom can build a community, and the parents can do this at home. They're not required to, but it can give them a chance to sort of replicate what we do in the classroom and what they do at home if they want to. Some tools for managing classroom behavior is that positive praise works well for some students. Some students respond really well to being told that they've done something well. For example, if a student followed the directions for a given task, praising them on what they did will make them want to do it again. However, it is important to remember that this does not work for all students, and it is important to only use it for the students that will benefit from it. Another thing is to link negative or positive behaviors to the rules. So for example, if a classroom rule is use walking feet and a student is walking to the rug, which is a positive behavior, the teacher can say, "I like how Sally is walking to the rug." If she was running to the rug, the teacher could remind her about the classroom rules and could ask Sally how she could change her behavior. Another thing is to allow for fidgeting, doodling, walking around the classroom, and flexible seating. This was something that was mentioned in Paula Kluth's article on her blog. And a lot of times these behaviors are seen as unexpected or what should not be allowed in the classroom. And a lot of times these are the reasons that students are able to focus and the students are able to learn the material that's being presented to them. So it's important to understand what your students need and allow for them to use these supports in ways that they are able to focus. Some tips for understanding your students is asking the students what their needs are and how you can help them. This sometimes depends on the age of the student or who the student is. For example, sometimes the students can be the best people to tell you what they need. In Paula Kluth's article I mentioned earlier, she used an example of a student insisting that they needed to suck on a jawbreaker in order to focus. The teachers did not really believe the student at first, but they tried it anyway, and it turned out to be just what the child needed to focus. So sometimes the students really are their best advocates and they know what they need. So give it a try. If it doesn't work, then try to find something else, but try to listen to what the students are asking for and what they're saying they need. And then another thing is just knowing your students, understanding them, and taking the time to learn what they need. A lot of times you can figure out what works best for a child just based on the observations. So this will take a little bit in the beginning of the year, but once you're in the classroom for 3 to 4 weeks, you should be able to figure out what your students want and need to be able to learn in the classroom. One of the first strategies I want to focus on is having a reward system in the classroom. This can be a group reward system or an individual reward system. For group reward systems or the whole class, it gives them a chance to focus on classroom goals as a whole. Group rewards should be positive based. For example, having a goal of a pizza party if the class fills a marble jar, and the class would get a marble if they followed the rules and expectations. Individual reward systems focus on smaller individual expectations and goals. If a student achieves a goal, they get an agreed upon reward. For example, if the goal is for Jackson to follow the agreed expectations in math class, specific to him and the class, he gets 5 minutes of iPad time if he achieves this goal. The next strategy I want to talk about is self-regulation. This is an important part in the behavior management process because it empowers students to be in charge of their own behavioral management. We can teach the students how to self-regulate, and one way of doing this is implementing a tool in the classroom that the students can use to express how they're feeling for that day. This can be a mood board or a version of a mood board. There's tons of stuff out there online. And another thing is having a quiet space in the classroom and teaching the students how to use that quiet space. So for example, one of the expectations can be that if a student needs 5 minutes to cool down, that they have a timer that times them for 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes they have to assess themselves and see if they're ready to join the group. Could be a quiet corner, a gas station, an igloo, or like a cool down spot. And then also providing brain breaks for the students, a short break for the students to rejuvenate. This can be whole class or individual. And students of all ages need this because sitting in a classroom all day is not stimulating enough for them and they get bored. Another way to do this is implementing movement and engaging lessons into your everyday teaching, because then the students won't need as many brain breaks because they'll be engaged in the lessons. The next strategy I want to discuss is giving students a role in the classroom. Making the students feel like they're part of the classroom and that they have a responsibility in the classroom makes them feel like that space is their own, which makes them not want to act out in certain ways that are against expectations. So one way of doing this is having classroom jobs. This gives the students the chance to feel important and included in the classroom. And the students and the teachers can come up with these jobs together, or the teacher can assign these jobs at the beginning of the year and they can change throughout the year. This way the students know what they're doing and know what their expectations are for each week that they are that specific job. The last strategy I want to talk about is providing a safe and including space. The classroom should feel like a place that the students feel safe and comfortable in. So one way to do this is having flexible seating. Cushions, yoga ball chairs, wobble stools, normal desk chair, letting someone stand, a beanbag chair, all of that can be considered flexible seating. And it's whatever the student needs at that moment. So some students can't sit on the rug. Some students like to sit in a desk chair. Some students want to stand. Some students don't want to sit. So it's whatever that student needs to feel comfortable and in order to pay attention. Another thing is to plan your classroom accordingly. So this goes back to knowing your students and knowing what their needs are when you set up your classroom. One thing you can do before the students get there is set up a classroom that is open, as an open space. Consider where you put things like near the door, away from the door, where you put your teacher desk, how you face the students, stuff like that. But then once the students actually come there and you figure out what their needs are, then you can change your classroom accordingly. With the collection of these tips and strategies and the used resources, I think I will have access to a lot of good material when I have my own classroom. This is a quick document I can access or a video I can watch if I need some ideas for my classroom. I think this ties nicely in with all of our themes, as part of behavior management is communicating with the families and creating a community, which is the Inclusive Schools and Community theme. Also, utilizing different technologies to help with behavior management is another connection to themes, the inclusive and innovative technology theme. I am looking forward to using this in the future.